Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sapien Fireside Chat. I'm Missy Martin. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Sapien. I'm joined here today by Gisèle Huff, who is the President of Fund for Humanity. She has spent decades funding different initiatives, raising awareness on education reform, and holding various board positions. So we are so thankful to have her join, the groups of leaders, change makers, and sense makers that we've had on these fireside chats. So thank you so much, Gisèle, for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
So just to dive right into it, as I mentioned, you've done so much in your lifetime. Can you tell us, a little bit about your experience about Fund for Humanity and the work that you're doing with the nonprofit?
Yes, so for 22 years, I was the executive director of a small family foundation in San Francisco, which started out as, and I was a one-woman office. So, I was the only person working there, and I was directly responsible to the trustees. And my batting average in terms of getting the trustees to agree with the picks that I made for funding was about 99%. So it was quite, yes, it was pretty much, I was doing my own thing, so to speak. And we started out as trying to reform education, and it became clear to me that that was putting a band-aid on a dying man, and that we needed to transform it. So the second half of my career was all about trying to transform education with the use of technology as an integral part of the curriculum to relieve teachers from the grunt work that they spend so much time doing. But we're still not there by a long shot, and I had hopes that COVID would open the door to this, but it has not. It requires, it's the Titanic, it's like, it's impossible to turn. It's a very, very difficult institution to make an impact on. So I retired in 2020, and in 2018, my beloved son died of pancreatic cancer in November, 7 weeks after he was diagnosed. And Gerald was a strong proponent of universal basic income because, as principal software engineer for the Model 3 Tesla and previous experiences he had in the tech world, he was very concerned about technological unemployment. So technological unemployment, when the robots are coming, as human labor loses its value, how do you sustain humans if there are no jobs for them? Since our economic system is based on work, what do you do? And Gerald's solution was, as a transition, until we figure it out in the long term, we need to supply people with a floor, an economic floor under which they cannot fall, so that they at least can survive the transitional period. When you think about this, the Industrial Revolution, which started to occur in the 19th century, many people were immiserated because of it. Millions of people, but it was not a time where you had social media and you could, take out the pitchforks. Although the Luddites did, right? The Luddites in England went after all the machines, the looms, the automated looms, because they thought that they would lose their jobs. And it was a small ripple. But if you were to, eliminate 30% of the jobs in this country over a short period of time, which is very possible, you could very well see pitchforks and, blood on the street. So anyway, after Gerald died and I retired, it was even before I retired that I started in 2019. I founded the Gerald Huff Fund for Humanity, named after him, in order to promote universal basic income. It's a nonprofit. I'm using all the knowledge I gathered as on the other side of a nonprofit, we mean the person who funds it. And I'm trying to get the same results that I got in the education world, where I was known as the queen of ROI. So I'm trying to do the same kind of targeted spaghetti at the wall investing in the UBI space.
That's incredible. It's definitely needed, and that's why at Sapien we want to implement some type of UBI model. So we're excited to have you, your wealth of wisdom to help us with this journey. And know that you have so much experience in what works and what doesn't. If you're the queen of ROI, then we've really hit the jackpot, haven't we? And I also wanted to say that I am so happy that you worked on education reform. My mom's a teacher. She's an elementary school teacher. I know how many hours she puts into preparing for the school day. It can be right when she gets home to 2 a.m. trying to create something that's really wonderful for the children, but it takes a lot out of her. So doing that education reform is vital, because our teachers, they do so much work, and they deserve their own time too. And I appreciate the work that they do, but living life is important too. So I appreciate that. And I know that Gerald was such an amazing person. Stephen, who connected us, I'm so thankful that he connected us, because you both are amazing people, and I'm sorry that what happened with Gerald, but I'm glad that his legacy can live on in such a phenomenal way. So with Fund for Humanity, what are you working on right now? You recently went to a conference and spoke there. What types of events do you go to, and what types of initiatives are you spearheading at the moment?
So when I first decided to start the fund, I did some due diligence in the field to see who was doing what, because I'm also a believer in not being redundant. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't do things that other people are doing better, or that I have a very small budget. It's basically, although at the beginning I had a big grant from a friend of mine who matched what I was giving, but now the budget is strictly my own personal contribution and that of my daughter-in-law. So we have a very limited budget. So when I did the due diligence, what was clear to me was that there were any number. I mean, the Economic Security Project, which is Chris Hughes, who used to be the partner of Mark Zuckerberg when they first launched Facebook. And he has funded this organization. It's very, very involved in, pilots and lobbying. And I mean, they have a huge budget. Pilots are extremely expensive. That's completely out of my reach. But what I saw was that there was very little being done sort of in the marketing and PR space. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on when pilots are launched and pilots are explained, and the research on pilots gets touted and all of that, but that's not the same thing as selling a product, right? There was no one who was really selling this product. So in my small way, I started, I made investment, and one of the continuing investment I make is in a website called Basic Income Today, which consolidates everything that's written you know, on a daily basis, they publish 1 or 2 articles. It's edited by my board member, Gerald's friend and colleague, and UBI guru since 2013, Scott Sentence. He's the editor, and you know, anything you want to know about UBI, you can read about this on a site that is very accessible. You know, it's not academic. It's meant for the people who don't know anything about it, and you can follow what's going on. So I continue to support that. I also fund a grassroots organization called Income Movement. I started funding them in 2019. They didn't exist at that time, but they were the person who runs it, Stacy Rutland, was the person in charge of the very first, in 2019, the very first basic income march, which was worldwide on, you know, 13 countries. It was quite amazing, and I funded a piece of it, and it became a yearly thing. Of course, 2020 we didn't do it. And the Income Movement group is a grassroots mobilization group. So it does what I'm interested in, which is to promote UBI as a thing and to mobilize people to do the same thing. So that's something I continue to do. And as I go along, I throw, you know, spaghetti at the wall. I made an investment early on based on a lunch I had with a supervisor of the Santa Clara County down on the peninsula. I live in San Francisco. And he was a proponent of UBI. I had lunch with him, and I discussed with him the possibility of doing a program for transitioning foster youth who are, you know, let loose without any support systems, and really failed a great, you know, many times. So he thought that was a good idea and proposed it to the Board of Supervisors, and it became a thing. So it was the first in this century, the first UBI pilot funded by a government entity, Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. And that was something that he gives me credit for a long, you know, for making happen. So that's very unusual for a politician to do that. If Dave Cortez is his name. And he went on to be elected, as he is now, a member of the California Senate, where he's touting UBI as well. So you see, this small investment, as it was just gathering, you know, moss. I keep on, you know, there is a ballot initiative that is trying to get on the ballot in Oregon to start a UBI for every Oregonian, much like the one that's been operating in Alaska since the 70s, where you just get a check every year and you get it, you know, unconditionally. Every Oregonian would get it. So I made an investment in the signature gathering effort to put this on the ballot in Oregon. So those are the kinds of, and anytime, you know, something comes along, people know this. So people in the field know this. So they send people my way with those kinds of small investments that are within my budget, and that eventually can have a big impact. I mean, even if the initiative in Oregon doesn't pass, which is very common, it usually takes 2 or 3, you know, voting cycles for something to get. Just getting it on the ballot would be a great thing. So it's worth the investment.
Wow, you're doing so much. How do we get you elected to Congress?
How do I
Giselle,
what?
how do we get you elected to Congress?
Oh, please, I did that. I tried that once.
Oh,
I ran for
really?
Congress in '98, but I lost in the primary, as it were. I ran as a Republican because at that time, that's what I was. Or at least I was never a Republican. I was a libertarian. But running for Congress, I mean, I certainly couldn't run as a Democrat because the entrenched person was a Democrat. And it's at that time, you know, I was a believer, as libertarians are, I was a believer in small government, you know, the kind of low taxes, that kind of thing. And mostly efficiency, right? I mean, my beef with the government at the time to this day is that it's not very efficient. I mean, when you think about how far behind our government institutions are in terms of the most basic kind of computer, you know, of technology, or when you think about that incredible moment when Zuckerberg testified in front of the Senate, and they were asking these men, you know, mostly men, mostly white-haired, asking him questions that a 10-year-old knew the answer to. And him looking like, what? Who am I talking to? The people who run this country? You know, it's ludicrous. I've run out of adjectives, all right? I live in a period of time in my life where I can't find enough adjectives to describe what we're living in. It's just beyond words, literally.
It definitely is difficult. Something that we had discussed before starting the fireside chat is that there's a lot of amazing tech that's coming down the pipeline. How do you think that technology companies can help initiatives like UBI helping move, you know, different social impact initiatives forward?
So there needs to be a mind shift, just as there needs to be in the population at large. I mean, people have to stop thinking of UBI as a handout and just one more welfare thing. It's not a handout. It's a sharing in the prosperity that everyone, as a, you know, contributes to. An economic system where it's not something that people have thought about that way, because all through the, you know, millennia, it's been that the people who own the means of production, to quote Karl Marx, have written the rules, and everybody lives within those rules, and the rules benefit the people at the top. It's been that way since since they were building the pyramids. But all, you see, I'm talking about building the pyramids, and that required technology. The miracle, I mean, of people who had no tools to speak of, you know, except hoists and human labor, to build those impressive, you know, structures is amazing. And it's technology that enabled them to do that, even a very low level of technology. Well, as we know, technology is growing beyond words. So the conference that I went to, that we discussed before we got on the air, was the masters of the universe, if you will, in the world of technology, the people who are the leading edge of the new technologies. And I was sitting there, you know, a person who's pretty much aware of what's going on. I mean, I keep up with things. I was blown away by the potential of what they were discussing in terms of healthcare, in terms of climate, you know, change, and all of the things that they were discussing. And so I'm going to insert here that my late son wrote a techno thriller called Crisis 2038, which is available for free to listen to on the website of the Fund for Humanity, which is www.fundforhumanity.org. If you go to the site, you can download and listen to the book. And the reason I'm mentioning it is that the subtitle of the book is, Will Technology Ever Benefit Us All? And as I sat there in that conference and listened to these people discuss the technologies that are coming down the pike, that's what I was thinking about. Will they ever benefit us all? And the mindset of the people in that room was, as I see it, this is my opinion, was we are improving the world by improving our products, right? Without taking the next step. But what about the people who can't afford it? Because all of the things they were talking about, those are leading edge things, you know. It's like the Apple 13 phone, right? When it comes out, it's, I don't know, $1,500. So it's terrific for, you know, maybe 60% of the population, but you've got 40% of the population in America in 2022 that cannot afford a $400 expense if their car breaks down. And you know what that means? If the car breaks down, they lose their job. If they lose their job, they can't pay the rent. So what do? Well, they turn to crime, right? They have to, can they do? And it's those people that have to be thought of by people like the people in that room. And that's not their mindset. Their mindset is, if I improve my product and make it more available and cheaper, I've done my job. No, they're the people who have the power. They're the 1%. If the 1% does not tackle this, the 99% are going to get them. Eventually. Because this is not the same world as it was in the previous centuries. This is a different world.
To me, it oftentimes feels like when technology leaders talk about these grand ideas and products, and that's going to change the world, it's almost a way of convincing themselves that, you know, what I'm doing is okay, even though there are these ramifications that pop up, and creating more inequality. So it is creating, you know, maybe better lives for some people, but then making, you know, potentially other lives even worse because the inequality gap is becoming even larger. And so it just feels like it's so important to, one, make sure that the wealth distribution is, you know, more equal, but also make sure that we're bringing other people to the table when these products are being built so that it can be more equal. However, I like the question that you posed was, you know, will technology ever be, you know, great for everybody? And it feels like the answer is no, because there's always something that, you know, it doesn't pan out for, you know, maybe it's a smaller portion of the population, but it doesn't feel like it across the board will help people. I'm curious to hear your opinion on that. Do you think that, you know, technology can be beneficial to all?
Yes, I think that it has the potential of being beneficial to all because it has the potential of reducing costs of everything to practically nothing. Now, it requires an entire revolution of the way we think about things. I mean, of the societal bonds, of the social contract, because as we know, human wants are infinite, right? But human needs are very limited. You just need a bare, you know, that's why, you know, we're talking about UBI as being a floor. And Andrew Yang, who was, you know, for whom it was a very big part of his campaign when he ran for president, was talking about $1,000 a month, right? That's not a whole lot of money. You can't live like Rockefeller on $1,000 a month. But that's the point. I mean, you can live on $1,000 a month. So mind you, think about $1,000 a month and think about even young. For me, the most exciting part of it, I'm very excited about all of it. But when I think about an 18-year-old or a 14-year-old who knows that when he's 18 or she's 18, they begin to get $1,000 a month. No questions asked, it just comes to them. Imagine what your horizons that opens to them. Not only the very poor kids, but very rich kids whose parents want him to be a doctor or want her to be a lawyer. And they don't want to build guitars. Well, now they can take the $1,000 a month with Joe and Susan. The three of them can move to Alabama instead of having to pay, $5,000 a month rent in San Francisco. They can find a place to live very nice in a little town in Alabama that has no jobs. They don't need a job because they get $1,000 a month. And they can pay $500 a month rent and have $2,500 left to live their lives, build guitars, write the great American novel, whatever. So it's a great opportunity for young people, especially poor young people who have nothing, who face nothing, who they have no support, they have no way of going to school. They're just, their lives start off as a deep hole. And in addition to that, all the other people in society who need that little extra, and I'm talking about probably the bottom 50%, but 50% of the population is a lot of people. And as the richer you are, the more it gets close. You don't see a dime of it. You don't see them. It's taken back to taxes. So it's giving dignity to people is what it is, and freedom. I mean, the people in this country, who scream about freedom and decide that wearing a mask is something that takes away their freedom, or to think about what freedom UBI gives people, because they can make decisions about their own lives instead of, having no decisions to make. They're merely surviving. So going back to your original question, I do think that if I'm seeing a little bit of hope in the way the younger generation sees themselves. For one thing, they don't accept, if they work for a place like Google or now Twitter or one of the big tech companies of the 21st century, and they don't like positions that the company takes, they're very vocal about it, right? And that never happened before. And the other thing is that they seem to be more interested in experiences than in accumulating material stuff. When I was a young woman, my late husband and I, we were kind of social climbing in New York, if you could call it that. And I bet most of the people listening don't even know what that means, but it's a thing. It was a thing then. When we were, we were concerned about how nice our home looked. We bought expensive furniture. We went antique, hunting. We went to the opera. We went to the ballet. I mean, there was a lifestyle that involved spending money and acquiring things. I'm not sure that young people do that anymore. I mean, I see my grandchildren. The entire, one armchair that I own costs more than the two of them's entire furniture in their apartments cost. I mean, they have no interest in that. That's not what they're interested in.
I can resonate with it.
Yeah, so so that gives me hope, right? Because this is the problem. If you can curb the wants and concentrate more on the needs, especially of those who have nothing, those who have a lot will have a lot for a long, long time. Their great grandchildren will have a lot because they've captured that. But as things progress, if we allow technology to bring down the costs of everything, right? Then think about one technology that nobody talks about it anymore, but it was very much talked about a few years ago, and Gerald was very interested in it, nanotechnology. So as my understanding of that nanotechnology is, it addresses the atoms that everything is made up of. You're made up of atoms. The desk I'm sitting in front of is made up of, everything is made up of atoms. And nanotechnology has a way of breaking down the atoms to their, so breaking down the desk and putting it back together again as a bookcase, which means that you keep on using the same resources over and over again. And instead of going out and buying a navy blue sweater, I just go to the place where that happens. I give them this sweater, costs 6 cents, and they make it into a navy blue sweater, not by dyeing it, by recombining, or into a navy blue dress. So if that technology, that's this kind of thinking that is required, whether nanotechnology occurs, people were talking about the end of the century. I don't know, we're certainly not going to see it. But the idea that first of all, you keep on recycling the resources. So the earth is now happy as a clam, right? I mean, that's terrible. Whatever. Anyway, the earth is, we saved the earth, right? And I mean, so there is the potential. I see, in my best moments, I see the potential.
I think there's potential too. And as I was saying, I resonate with that. Definitely more experiences than actual material things. I tell my mom usually for, holidays and things like that, I don't want any more stuff. I just want to be together. I think I'm seeing my peers and even a generation below me really care about two things: health and relationships. And those are, and of course, basic needs. You need shelter, you need food. And health, I think, is a part of that, and relationships too. You can't live without either one of those. But I'm glad that it's shifting more toward that way. And I do think that we need to be optimistic. Something that I often think about is that there's no silver bullet for one technology. It's going to be a quilt. The solution is going to be a quilted solution. And so I think that, for example, Sapien can be a part of that, but it's going to be, a bunch of different technologies that come together and make a difference. So I'm glad that on the creator side, and also the UBI side, we can do something about that, and you can help us navigate in the right direction, because we know that we're not perfect. So bringing together different perspectives so that we can navigate it in the right way and hear from community or hear from different people, where it should go. I think that's the most important, rather than siloing ourselves off. And so it's exciting. The future is exciting. It's also scary, because you don't want to fall in a trap where Web 2, something like Facebook, they maybe thought that they were doing something really great. And in a lot of ways, there's some benefit. People got to collaborate from distances, but at the same time, it's influencing elections. It's, keeping people's attention addicted to their news feeds. And so there's a lot of ramifications that came out of that. So making sure, yes, there is a lot of potential with this specific technology, but what could be the possible outcomes if we don't pay attention to them?
Absolutely. And this is something that I heard at the conference, Web 3. If you think Web 2 was scary, wait until you see Web 3. And actually, if I understand it correctly, and I may be wrong because this is not my space, basically it adds the dimension of ownership,
Yep.
right? I mean, it's and that gets even more complicated, and it's all about, you know, virtual reality, which is, I'm interested that you said that that your generation and below are concerned or want relationships, because this is going to kill relationships. I mean, in a way, it will make it more intense, but not person to person. And boy, there's nothing like a hug. I'm a big hugger. I think hugs are absolutely vital to surviving. You need hugs. I mean, the worst thing that happened to me during the COVID, you know, shutdown was the lack of hugs. I can live with solitude, and I love my solitude, but boy, I need hugs from time to time, and not being able to get them was very bad. So anything that takes away from the physical contact of people, for me, is a bad thing. I think you need to, you know, you need to touch. That's important.
It is important. That's definitely something where when I'm feeling down, need a hug. That's something that fixes almost everything or helps a lot.
It helps. Yes.
And I do something that I really appreciate about Rob and Ankit, the co-CEOs of Sapien, is that one of the values that they put in place for Sapien is technology that you can put away. So developing technology that is helpful, but that you're not addicted to and need to be on all the time, so that you can put that away. Because what really matters, we're called sapient humans. It's about being humans first. So those relationships are important. So while building this technology, how do we make it so that it's helpful, but not addictive, and that people can, you know, use it to leverage and help their lives, but still be in the real world?
And that's why, and that's precisely what UBI does. That's why it's such a good fit, Sapien and, you know, and UBI, because it does, it gives that same kind of floor, you know, the same kind of opportunity for people. Give it without having, with no conditions, right? So as you said, not it's not, it's automatic. I mean, it's something they use and not use, and to me, that's freedom. Addiction is not freedom. I mean, being, you know, spending all your time on Twitter or Facebook, that's addiction. And it takes away from your freedom. And if it takes away from your freedom, it takes away from your humanity.
It is addictive, and I've done this myself, and I've had friends just totally shut down their phones and not use them anymore. It is a lot harder, I think, especially for my peers, because that's how we communicate. So if you shut yours down, then you're not connected, and then people don't really like calling on the phone. I've done that before, even with my best friend. I called her randomly on the phone, which is something that, you know, people did. I call her, and that's like anxiety inducing for her. Calling her, it's like, do not do that ever again.
So you
texting, or you schedule a time to talk. You have to schedule a time, like, okay, she's in med school right now, so she's like, in 3 weeks we could talk because I have a test coming up. But isn't that kind of crazy that we feel like we have to schedule time with each other, and it's 3 weeks out, and you can't just pick up the phone and call?
It is crazy. I mean, you know, in my time, that's all we did, pick up the phone and call. We didn't even leave messages. There was no such thing. You called, and, you know, either the person was there or not. There was no message. And then you kept trying till you got the person.
Yeah, my mom does that, and when she leaves voicemails, because now you can leave messages.
Yes.
She always tells me the time, because she doesn't think that it's gonna tell me the time that she calls. She's like, okay, hi Missy, it's 7:10 your time. And so it reminds me of that a little bit. Shifting now, I do want to talk a little bit about your book. In addition to your son being an author, you're about to publish your own book. So I want to highlight that, because it's such a courageous and powerful story. So would you mind talking a little bit about it and
Right.
how we can get our hands on it?
Well, it's not, it probably won't be published until the end of August is kind of where we're looking at. So I started writing the book in 2015 because I had time. I'm a very good time manager, and my job was not a time job because it was mostly going to conferences. And, once a year I had to read all the proposals, and that's pretty much everything. I mean, I spend a lot of time on the phone and emailing people and, and serving on boards of the people that we gave money to, but I had a lot of time. So I started writing my memoir, and I wrote about 17,000 words about my story, what happened, my origin story, if you will. I was born in France during the war. I lost 18 members of my family to the Holocaust and so on. Then when I got to the point in my life where I was in the present and I was describing my career and what I was doing, I found myself in 2015 not able to write about the people I was working with. I mean, it felt awkward to me, not possible to talk about. I mean, one of the people, for instance, with whom I was very friendly and I was working with is Jeb Bush. And on the other side of the aisle, Bob Wise, who was the governor of West Virginia. And these were people I worked with. So I'm just giving those two people as an example, but I couldn't, I felt awkward actually writing in the present about the people I was working with at the time. So I put it aside and I picked it up in 2020 after I retired. And so the book is 54,000 words. It's about 200 pages. And it's the first part of my life, and then my career in education, and then everything I've done since with Gerald's passing and the fund and so on. And the title is Force of Nature. And the subtitle is, let's see if I can get it, the remarkable true story of one Holocaust survivor's resiliency, tenacity, and purpose. So it's all about that. And, the kinds of experiences I've had. I mean, I spent hours and hours having discussions with Milton Friedman. As I said, I'm a friend of both Jeb Bush and Bob Wise. There are many people who, if you like Charles Koch, who, if you say my name, will know exactly who I am. I mean, I no longer have a relationship with him, but I did at one point in my career. I mean, Reed Hastings. I mean, I had, many adventures in my career, and I continued to have adventures like this conference that I went to, where Samir Ismail, who is the author of Exponential Organizations and a big deal in the tech world and the VC world, was a co-host. He and I had a 1 hour long conversation. Didn't know me from Adam, but after I made my speech, we had this conversation, and he gave me his email address. So the book explains all of this happened to me.
I'm looking forward to reading it and getting, some of those stories that you've been talking about. And it's absolutely incredible. There are no words to describe you, Gisèle, just because you are just such an amazing person. That doesn't quite cut it. But you're a powerhouse.
You're too kind. You're too kind.
You are a powerhouse, though. When we got on this call, you're talking about the conference and all these, masters of the universe in the tech world really shaping our lives in a lot of way, and talking more, talk about how they're going to change the world, but really only care about their bottom line. And you got up on stage and told them, what's up and why they should really be caring about the people. And I think that, it takes a very bold, courageous, and just, again, phenomenal person to do that. So thank you for all of the work that you've done. And wow, I learn something new every time with you. You're connected to so many different types of people, and you bring everyone together and have this amazing wisdom that you provide. And thank you.
Thank you. Really, I understand. I'm not blind to to who I am, but I know my shortcomings also, very much so. And it's really, you come to a point in life where you have nothing to lose, right? I mean, as long as you feel comfortable about your grasp of the language and the philosophies you espouse, there's no reason why you can't, everybody can't do what I do. Really, there is no reason. And when you read the book, you'll see how I, moved from one place to another and how I got to where I am. And it's not extraordinary. I'm an ordinary person. I'm not the smartest person in the room, pretty much in the rooms I go to. I think it's mostly being, in French, we have a saying, elle est bien dans sa peau. She's well in her skin, which is really about self-confidence. And I don't mean arrogance. I mean the feeling that you know who you are, you like who you are. Very important. If you don't like yourself, you can't live a good life. You must like yourself. And you just proceed apace as things come up. That's pretty much what I've done.
You gave me a dose of courage today. I feel like after this conversation, I can put on a superwoman suit and
yes.
fly, maybe.
Yes.
That's amazing advice. And I think it's an important reminder for every day. You have done so much, and you, as you said, you manage your time well, something that probably many of us can learn from you. But using your time in a way that helps people, that's what we all should be doing, focusing on, the ways that we can make an impact, and not just say that we're wanting to make an impact, actually seeing, what am I actually accomplishing? I think that something that I've personally experienced is people like to talk about the impact that they've made, but sometimes it doesn't actually, they talk a lot, but don't actually walk a lot. And you're someone who walks the walk. So that's amazing. You're an incredible, leader, woman, and you picked someone for your historical avatar who is also an amazing woman. I would love to hear more about who you picked and why for your Sapien NFT passport.
So I was trying to find, because I'm my PhD is in political philosophy, actually. I mean, political science, but I was interested and I followed political philosophy. And unfortunately, there are no women political philosophers historically. I mean, so I tried, as you know, to use Hannah Arendt, because she was one in the middle of the last century, but she was taken. And she would have been the perfect person. I mean, in the sense that she was a German Jewish woman who coined the phrase, the banality of evil, which, I mean, is completely within, the mindset. I mean, I totally embraced what she was writing about. And she had the same kind of experience. So I was looking for someone a woman who had that kind of, impact. And although she's not well known, she was not a philosopher. Emma Goldman was a very important part of the Russian Revolution, of the Bolshevik Revolution, which in a sense is, she was a Marxist. And that's not a philosophy I espouse economically. But Marx's early writings actually describe the kind of world that the human species needs to strive for if it's going to survive, which is the distribution of resources in an equitable basis so that everyone counts and everyone survives. And she was a big proponent of that, but she did it in a, she was an intellectual, but she also was she was a revolutionary. She actually fought. So I thought, okay, I'd settle for it.
Yeah, sorry that your first choice was reserved. I think that we're coming upon more of these situations as there's only so many really famous people throughout history. And so as they're getting picked up, people are like, oh no, I had that happen the other day. Actually, I picked Rachel Carson, an environmental scientist and ecologist from.
I remember her well. She came out when I was a young woman. Her work was in the mid-50s, late 40s, 50s. Yeah.
With Silent Spring. Did you ever read that book?
Oh, sure. It was a big deal when it came out. I remember. It was the first time anybody had even pointed out to that. And imagine how much worse it's gotten since then.
Yeah, I remember being in a kitchen in 2015 with different scientists who have done research on glyphosate and different agrochemicals and talking about the effects. And then we see a few years later, an over $1 billion verdict for someone who, got cancer from glyphosate, and just reminds me of, Rachel Carson's writings, which was decades before any of this happened, saying this will happen, and how much backlash she got, especially as a woman. Just, she's making this up. This isn't something that, at least I wasn't alive then, but what I read is that there was a lot of backlash.
Yes.
I actually, I'm curious to hear what that was like, reading her book and what the public's opinion was at the time, because now we look back and it's like Rachel Carson was right.
Well, I lived in New York at the time, and New York City is a more progressive place. And the New York Times at the time, I don't remember being aware of a huge backlash. But at the time, I wasn't really following those things. I remember reading the book, but that was just incidental, and I thought, well, yeah, it sounds pretty bad, what could happen, and pretty much stopped thinking about it. Because in those days, although there was a lot more pollution in those days, Pittsburgh, I think it was Pittsburgh, the river caught on fire. I mean, and there were things, and smog. I mean, when you landed in Los Angeles, it was like going through, a cloud of brown stuff. It was very visible, that kind of pollution. It was written about, and you found out about it, but I wasn't that interested in those things in those days. I wasn't following. I had other things too. I was social climbing, which, that's kind of the thing. People have their lives to live. I remember talking to Gerald when he was 37. I remember saying to him, you're never going to see Social Security. It'll be when you get that age, which of course is not true. It is not happening. If he would, it's not going to go away in the next 10 years. But at the time I said, why aren't you doing something about it? Why isn't your generation doing something about it? And he said, Mom, I have my life to live. Every day I have things to do at work. And I mean, he was very clear-eyed about that. And I think this is true. This is the problem. People, are busy with their lives. The ones who are poor are more than busy with their lives. They're stressed with their lives. They can barely, put food on the table. How do you expect people to spend time if people like me in those days didn't? If people like Gerald when he was 37 didn't, when people like the people at the conference don't, how are you going to, it's going to take a cataclysm. It's going to take something really horrible.
We need UBI to help.
Well, we need UBI in order to forestall it, at the very least, we need that. At least to give people a thought.
I pray that there's change on the horizon. All we can do is keep trying and stay optimistic. If we don't have the optimism or hope, then there's nothing that we can do there.
Well, we have to convince each other that we need to participate. It's very important.
Something that I think a lot of people in their 20s right now, at least from my perspective, want to make a change. But there's a lot of anxiety around and stress around all the different problems that there are. A new phrase that's been coined is eco-anxiety, anxiety over climate change and it destroying humanity and our earth. And this is something that people actually have to go seek mental health services for this anxiety over all these different issues. People want to help with so much and it's a lot. And I actually, this past weekend, I listened to presentations of high school and college students doing climate action projects. And more than one was on how do we address eco-anxiety so that we can do the projects that we want to do, which is really incredibly sad that that's where it's come to, that people feel so paralyzed by the issues. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on something like that. And what advice would you give to young people, high school and college students that are feeling paralyzed? They want to make an impact, but it's so overwhelming, all the different issues that they're seeing in front of them.
I think you have to get started. You have to actually pick one issue. I mean, whether it's climate or social justice, or you have to pick one issue, and then you have to start at the bottom of the ladder. You have to get involved with organizations that you identify as doing the work that's relevant to what you care about. And you have to lick envelopes, like people still do that, or send email, whatever it is. You have to. I'm saying that these things are like campaigns for for elections. That you have to start at the bottom, and you have to get involved. You have to devote a certain amount of time to it. You have to make a commitment to it. And you have to stick to it no matter how tedious it is or how hopeless it looks. Because I look back on history and I see that it took 70 years for women to get the vote. In 1973, there was one state, I can't remember which one, where a woman couldn't open her own credit card account. She needed her husband's, backing. 70, not so long ago. Took 50 years for gay people to be able to marry. It takes time. It takes time. And, I see, for instance, climate change. I see that technology is going to help us get out of there. But the technology, so I see on Twitter an ad by ExxonMobil that shows people working in a lab, and the explanation is we're working to bring different kinds of technologies, And one day we will have blah, blah, blah. And I commented, one day? No, 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 not one day. Like tomorrow we have to have that. So, you know, they're giving lip service to that. They're talking about it. If you keep up the pressure, it's going to accelerate the process. If you stop the pressure, it's going to be one day 50 years from now instead of one day 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So you have a role to play, you, the people who care about this as their priority. Setting a priority is a very important thing. You can't do everything. You have to decide, because to do everything is to do nothing. If you feel terrible about everything and you just, you know, get anxious about everything, I can understand that. I mean, I'm anxious about everything, but I found one thing that I think is a solution to some, you know, one of the problems. And of course I have an emotional attachment to it, but that's neither here nor there. People have emotional attachments to all the social justice, for instance. I mean, many of the people involved are people who themselves suffered from it, or people they love suffered from it, right? Injustice. So you have to pick a thing, and it has to be your priority. I mean, you have to do one of those pros and cons things, you know, you have to go through the process and be secure in your choice. And then make a commitment and find the people who are, other people who are doing it, and find the place where you contribute. Your contribution is the most useful. And then do it. That's it, period.
Takes a little bit of reflection there, a little bit of reflection, and then to stay in the course. I think that's great advice. Baby steps too, you know, starting from the bottom. It's not fun. I've looked at a few hundred envelopes in my life. It's not fun, but you know, it's part of the process. And
yes, it's not meant to be fun. It's a rite of passage, right? It's which is built into the human condition, right? You can't go from the mailroom to the CEO's spot in a year, right? There are steps, and at every step you have to reassess. Is this the right thing? Am I doing the most I can? Am I, you know, and as you were saying from the beginning, this is where you build relationships. When you read my book, you will see how many times I connected people to each other, and how you always have to ask yourself, what can I offer people? What can I give people that is valuable to them and at no cost to me? I mean, cost in the, you know, in the air quotes. Because it's that kind of sharing that gives you a base of operation for the aspirations you have. And that's true of everything, a career, you know, a cause, everything that you want to achieve in life is based on the relationships you build. And relationships are built on what can I give, not what can I take.
It's vital, the collaboration and sharing and gifting. I recently started Braiding Sweetgrass, the book, and the author talks about strawberries and how strawberries gift themselves to us without wanting anything in return. It's a very beautiful chapter. And so it reminds me a little bit about like that. We need to be some strawberries where they give so much to us without asking for anything in return.
That's true.
So to close out, Gisèle, it's been an amazing conversation. If you could nominate someone to receive an NFT passport, who would they be?
My daughter.
Your daughter.
Gisèle Huff.
We'll have to ask
I'll have
her
to introduce her. Yes.
That would be great. I would love to see what historical avatar she picks. I wonder,
Yeah.
is she into philosophy too?
No, she's a intellectual property lawyer.
So maybe a famous lawyer. It doesn't have to be that, but I'm
Yes,
curious
no,
to
it could
hear.
be. Yeah. It's especially, it's right. So she's an amazing human being too. I think my late husband and I did a fabulous job bringing up our children, considering how they turned out.
I'm excited to meet here. Thank you so much, Giselle.
Thank you.
We touched on so many,
Yes,
so
we
many
did.
different things. We could probably go hours on just one of those subjects, but I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for telling us about your story, about the Fund for Humanity, about UBI, about your book that's coming out. I think that those listening will learn so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.